This story is titled, "She Called Demanding Divorce After a Decade Together," saying she never wants to see me again and everything will be done remotely through court. So I simply said okay and hung up. But she forgot about the prenup that would cost her everything. Sup Reddit, I'm writing this from my garage workshop, where I've been spending the last few nights working on a custom steel project. It's better than dwelling on how my entire life got destroyed by a single text message. After 13 years of marriage, you'd think I would have rated more than 18 words. But here we are. Buckle up, because I need to give you some context before I get into the nuclear blast that was last Thursday. I'm 42 years old, male, and I'm a certified welder with my own small business. I didn't start out this way, though. I began as a pipeline welder when I was 24, putting in brutal 85-hour weeks in the Alaska oil fields. I spent 6 winters working in minus 35-degree conditions, living in worker housing that was basically glorified shipping containers. Most of the guys I worked with blew their money on fancy trucks and bar tabs every weekend. Me? I saved every possible dollar I could get my hands on. By the time I turned 30, I had managed to save enough money to put a down payment on a small commercial space. I got some basic equipment and spent my weekends and evenings after my day job setting up shop, building client relationships, and creating a website. That first year was absolutely brutal in every sense of the word. I took every job that came my way, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. I built railings, repaired farm equipment, and fabricated custom parts for local factories. I was sleeping maybe 4 hours a night and making just enough money to keep the lights on. The third year was when things started to turn around. I landed a contract with a commercial developer who needed custom railings for all their properties. That single contract paid for better equipment, which led to higher quality work, which naturally brought in better clients. 6 years ago, I finally quit my day job and went full-time with my own operation. Now I have 3 employees and a 4,500 square foot shop. The business is doing well, and I honestly can't complain about the money. But here's where things get complicated. My wife Jessica is 36, and she has a sister named Victoria who's 43. Victoria has been divorced for about 9 years now after her ex-husband left her for a younger colleague. Since then, Victoria has basically appointed herself as the neighborhood man-hater. She's got a cushy HR director job and spends most of her free time telling anyone who will listen that men are the root of all evil. Especially me. Victoria was subtle about it at first. 7 years back, Jessica casually mentioned over Chinese takeout how Victoria thought it was strange that I handled our budget. Most couples make financial decisions together, Jessica said in what seemed like an offhand comment. I had to remind her that she'd literally told me when we got married that she hated dealing with numbers and was happy to let me handle all the financial stuff. 5 years ago, Jessica started questioning purchases I made for the business. Victoria says business expenses should be separate from personal finances, she'd tell me with this new tone of suspicion. I had to explain again how cash flow works in a small business, especially one that's still growing. Jessica would nod like she understood, but she always looked unconvinced afterward. 4 years ago, we were at a family barbecue when Victoria loudly asked if Jessica had to get permission from me to buy a new dress. Jessica laughed it off at the time, but I noticed her shopping habits changed dramatically after that conversation. She started hiding small purchases from me, removing price tags before I could see them, and generally acting guilty about spending money that was rightfully hers to spend. Last Thursday afternoon, I was sitting in my office finishing up blueprints for a major commercial railing project. It was just another ordinary day, or so I thought. My phone buzzed with what I assumed would be a routine text from Jessica. Instead, I found myself staring at the message that would end my marriage. Marcus, I want a divorce. Direct all future communication through my attorney Robert Chen. Contact information to follow. 13 years of marriage ended in a text message that was shorter than most pizza delivery confirmations. There had been no warning signs that I'd noticed, at least none that seemed significant at the time. We'd had dinner together the night before and even made plans for a weekend barbecue with friends. Everything had seemed completely normal between us. Well, except for the massive blow-up we'd had on Monday night. Jessica had been spending increasingly more time with Victoria lately. Monday brunches, weeknight dinners, constant texting back and forth. I hadn't thought much of it since sisters are supposed to be close, right? But Monday evening, I noticed something that changed my perspective entirely. Our joint savings account was missing $6,200. Why did you transfer $6,000 without mentioning it? I asked, while she was scrolling through Facebook on the couch. She barely looked up from her phone when she answered. I don't need your permission for every financial move I make, she said, with an attitude I'd never heard from her before. It's a joint account, Jessica. That's literally the definition of joint, I replied, trying to keep my voice calm and reasonable. That's when she dropped the bomb that should have been a much bigger red flag than I realized at the time. You're so controlling with money, Marcus. Victoria says you're financially abusive, she said, finally looking up from her phone with accusatory eyes. You track every dollar I spend like I'm some kind of criminal. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. I track our business finances and household budget because someone has to do it, Jessica. You haven't looked at a bank statement in 4 years. Someone needs to make sure we're not overspending or missing payments. See, you're monitoring me, she yelled before storming off to the guest room for the night. I ended up sleeping alone on Monday, but by Thursday morning she seemed completely normal again. She made coffee, we talked about our plans for the weekend, and she even mentioned wanting to try that new restaurant downtown. Then she nuked our entire marriage via text message 7 hours later. I sat there staring at that message for a solid 12 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. All the emotions you'd expect were there. Rage, hurt, shock, confusion. But they were buried under this strange cold clarity that I'd never experienced before. She had set the terms of engagement very clearly. Lawyers only. Fine by me. My phone rang about 20 minutes later. It was Derek, my buddy since high school who owns a local construction company. We still on for drinks tonight? He asked in his usual cheerful voice. Rain check, I said. Just got a text from Jessica. She wants a divorce and all communication has to go through lawyers only. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Derek said, Jesus Christ, Marcus. Are you at the shop? Yeah, I'm here. Stay there, I'm coming over right now. Derek showed up 25 minutes later and walked straight to my office, closing the door behind him. What the hell happened? He asked, sitting down across from my desk. Instead of trying to explain, I just showed him the text message. He read it twice, then looked up at me with a grim expression. Fucking cold, he said. Lawyers only, huh? Have you answered her yet? Just replied, understood, I told him. Smart move. Listen, there are 2 things you need to do right fucking now, Derek said, leaning forward with the intensity of someone who'd been through this before. First, call Linda Rodriguez. She handled my cousin's divorce last year. The guy's wife tried taking him for everything, and Linda shut it down cold. Second, you need to lock down your finances today. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. If she's going lawyers first instead of trying to talk, she's planning something major. Derek had been through his own divorce mess 6 years back and lost half his business to a wife who'd never even set foot on a construction site. He'd learned the hard way what happens when you don't protect yourself immediately. His advice was coming from a place of hard-earned experience, and I wasn't about to ignore it. Then the practicality of the situation kicked in. Legal channels meant that all informal financial arrangements were instantly void. Jessica had made that crystal clear with her lawyers-only demand, so I needed to start thinking like everything between us was now a legal matter rather than a marriage. Fortunately, we'd kept our day-to-day finances mostly separate, something I'd learned from watching my dad get financially destroyed in his divorce when I was 17 years old. She had her personal account, I had mine, and we operated from there. The business was protected under an LLC that predated our marriage by several years, which was going to be crucial. For credit cards, Jessica had authorized user cards on my accounts, but they weren't joint ownership. I logged into all my banking apps and systematically found those cards, canceled them, and reported that the authorized user was no longer authorized to use them. Done. For monthly transfers, I had been sending $2,800 every month to her personal account since I earned about 4 times what she made from her part-time social media management hustle. I logged into the banking system, found the recurring transfer, and canceled it effective immediately. If she wanted financial support now, it would have to go through the legal process she'd just initiated. Subscriptions were next. Netflix, Amazon Prime, Spotify, and everything else were under my name and paid through my accounts. I logged out all devices and changed every single password. If she wanted streaming services now, she could buy them herself. The vehicle situation was more complicated. The SUV she drives is leased in my name and covered under my insurance policy. I didn't want to cancel the insurance immediately since that could create legal problems for me, but I made a note to discuss lease transfer options with my lawyer as soon as possible. Her gas card was tied to one of the credit cards I just canceled, so that was effectively worthless now anyway. The whole process took me maybe 50 minutes total. This wasn't revenge or spite. It was simply accepting the new reality that she had dictated with her text message. She'd drawn a clear line in the sand by demanding lawyers-only communication. Well, lawyers work on formal agreements, not assumptions based on a marriage that she had just unilaterally terminated. Derek nodded approvingly as I walked him through everything I'd done. "Good start," he said. "Now call Rodriguez. Don't wait until tomorrow." Information about her lawyer arrived via email about an hour later. I immediately forwarded it to Linda Rodriguez, the attorney Derek had recommended, along with a brief message. Received text demanding divorce with lawyers-only communication. Complied with request. Need immediate counsel on next steps, asset protection advice, and retainer information. After I finished my client drawings for the day, I headed home. The house was completely empty. She must have cleared out while I was working. For the first time in years, I slept in my own bed without someone complaining about my snoring. Honestly, I slept better than I had in months. Fast forward 75 hours to Sunday afternoon. My phone rang from an unknown number, but I had a pretty good feeling who it might be. "Is this Mr. Marcus Sullivan?" The voice was sharp and impatient. "This is Robert Chen representing Jessica Sullivan," he continued, without waiting for my response. "My client is experiencing some difficulties." "Okay," I said, keeping my voice completely even. "Her cards are being declined and access to funds has been abruptly terminated," he said with obvious irritation. "This is highly irregular, Mr. Sullivan. Financial status quo should be maintained during separation proceedings." "Mr. Chen," I replied calmly, "your client texted me on Thursday demanding divorce and stating that all communication must go through you. I acknowledged her request and complied fully. The informal financial arrangement we had during our marriage ceased when she terminated the marriage. Any future support will require formal legal discussion between you and my counsel, Linda Rodriguez, whom I've retained." There was a long pause with the sound of papers shuffling in the background. "She needs funds now for necessities and lodging," he said, sounding genuinely surprised by the situation. "Where is she currently staying?" I asked. "That's not relevant to this conversation," he snapped. "You've acted in bad faith by cutting her off without any notice." "Your client unilaterally ended our marriage via text message and established the lawyer's only rule," I responded. "She ended the status quo of trust and communication that allowed our informal arrangements to exist. Financial support will be determined through legal channels, not by panic phone calls over declined credit cards. She was no longer the primary account holder on anything the moment she sent that text." Another long pause. "My client seeks emergency financial relief," he said stiffly. "That's her prerogative," I replied. "Please direct all filings to my attorney. You have her contact information." "Yes," he said curtly. "Good. This conversation is now concluded per my wife's directive." And I hung up. She wanted cold and legal, and she was getting exactly that. I was now waiting for Rodriguez's call, knowing this was just the beginning of what was going to be a long process. Derek texted me later that evening. "How'd it go with Rodriguez?" I called him back and explained the entire situation, including Chen's panicked phone call about the declined cards. "Chen's scrambling," Derek said with satisfaction in his voice. "They expected you to keep paying for everything while they positioned themselves for maximum damage in court. It's a classic playbook. My ex tried the exact same thing. Stay the course, man." After hanging up with Derek, I forwarded Chen's contact information to Rodriguez. She called me back within the hour, and I could immediately tell why Derek had recommended her. She was sharp and direct, a former prosecutor turned divorce attorney with a solid reputation for handling high-conflict cases. She asked pointed questions about our finances, business history, and the circumstances surrounding Jessica's text. "Your friend's absolutely right," she said when I mentioned Derek's advice. "This has all the hallmarks of a prepared strategy, not an emotional decision." The text message, followed immediately by legal representation, suggests significant planning. The lawyer's only demand is particularly telling. It creates distance while positioning for emergency support claims. 1 week after receiving that text, things escalated exactly as Rodriguez had predicted they would. She got back to me the same day Chen had called, confirming that my actions were completely appropriate given Jessica's text message and demands. She advised me to document everything going forward. Every call, every text, every financial move. I started keeping a detailed spreadsheet logging everything that happened. It was strangely satisfying to have that level of organization. Chen's first official move came the following Wednesday, a formal request for emergency temporary spousal support. But it didn't stop there. He also demanded exclusive use of our house, which Jessica had already voluntarily abandoned. The amount he was demanding was absolutely staggering, $8,200 per month. Essentially, they wanted me to fund her old lifestyle, plus pay for new housing, plus cover her legal fees. The level of entitlement was expert level. Rodriguez responded professionally but firmly, countering with $1,950 in temporary support based on actual documented needs rather than lifestyle expectations. She noted that Jessica had voluntarily left the marital home that I was still occupying and maintaining. Most importantly, she highlighted Jessica's lawyer's only rule and pointed out that my actions were the direct consequence of following Jessica's explicit instructions. That's when the personal attacks began in earnest. Jessica's best friend Brooke called me on Friday night. I answered, hoping she might have some useful information about what was really going on. But that was a mistake. "Marcus, what the actual fuck?" she said without even saying hello first. "Hi, Brooke." "Don't Brooke me. Jessica is sleeping on my couch because you cut her off completely. She couldn't even buy groceries yesterday. You're making her homeless." "Brooke," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Jessica demanded a divorce via text message and insisted that all communication go through lawyers only. I respected her wishes completely. You know she barely makes anything from her work. How is she supposed to live?" Brooke's voice was getting more shrill. "She's completely freaking out. Her social media work brings in $1,350 in cash every month," I replied. "That's money she had before she decided to hire a lawyer without talking to me about any of this. All financial matters now go through her lawyer and my lawyer, the exact process she chose. That's cruel and vindictive after 13 years together," Brooke shot back. She was emotional and made a mistake. "Sending lawyers only instructions and hiring Robert Chen is a very specific kind of mistake," I said. "So was hiring an attorney without discussing anything with me first." There was silence on the other end for a moment. Then Brooke said, "She still deserved your support. And she would have had it if she'd wanted to discuss things like adults instead of torching our marriage by text and immediately lawyering up," I replied. "She set these rules, and now we're all following them. I'm somehow the villain for following her explicit instructions." The story Jessica was spinning to everyone was pure victimhood, conveniently leaving out the part where she refused to handle anything properly for over a month despite multiple legal notices. Then Victoria decided to enter the picture directly. I got a Facebook message from her that read, "Hope you're proud of yourself for forcing my sister to sleep on a couch while you hoard all the money like some kind of real big man." I didn't respond to the message, but I did take a screenshot of it and added it to the legal file that Rodriguez and I were building. My phone rang 22 minutes later, and sure enough, it was Victoria calling. I let it go straight to voicemail. Her message was predictably venomous. "You think you're so clever cutting her off like this? Jessica gave you the best years of her life, and this is how you repay her? By being a petty little man who can't handle losing control. She's going to take everything in court, and you know it." What struck me as particularly ironic was that for someone who supposedly hated men so much, Victoria sure seemed determined to make sure her sister continued benefiting from one. The hypocrisy was almost amusing. Derek came by the shop the next day with lunch, and we talked about the latest developments. "Have you heard anything else from Chen?" he asked. "Just the emergency filing," I said, showing him the paperwork. "He wants $8,200 a month." Derek nearly choked on his sandwich. "Jesus Christ, that's more than most people make in total income." "Apparently, Jessica is used to a certain lifestyle," I said, mocking Chen's country club tone. "Yeah, a lifestyle funded by your 85-hour work weeks and the permanent damage you did to your knees during those pipeline days," Derek replied. He had worked a season with me in Alaska, so he knew exactly what that life had been like. "Remember that Christmas when you worked straight through the holiday because the company was offering triple time?" Derek continued. "Jessica was pissed that you missed her family dinner, but she sure enjoyed that spa weekend you paid for in February with the overtime money." I remembered that winter vividly. I'd spent it welding sections of pipeline while standing in slush at minus 42 degrees. My fingers were so cold they wouldn't bend properly for days afterward. Jessica got her weekend at a 5-star resort, while I got permanent damage in my right knee that still bothers me on cold mornings. "This is exactly why I told you to call Rodriguez," Derek said. "She understands what guys like us go through to build something real. Chen's probably never had a callus in his entire life." The day before our conversation, I'd gotten a bank alert about an attempted withdrawal from an old savings account that we'd opened years ago for a vacation fund. I had completely forgotten about it. There was about $3,500 sitting there that we'd never touched. Jessica had apparently found the old debit card and tried to empty the account entirely. The bank flagged the sudden activity on what had been a completely dormant account for over 2 years. I went directly to the branch, explained the pending divorce situation, and had them freeze the account pending a legal agreement between the parties. It wasn't really about the money itself. It was about the principle of the situation. While her lawyer was screaming about me acting in bad faith, Jessica was actively trying to circumvent the very legal process that she had demanded. Rodriguez told me this actually helped our case significantly because it showed that Jessica wasn't just passively waiting for the legal process to work, but was actively trying to work around it. I was also getting text messages from Jessica's brother Ryan now. We used to be pretty close. I'd taught him welding basics when he was starting out and even helped him get his first union job. Now I was getting messages like, "Man, why do you have to be so cold? She's family." My reply was simple. She's family by her choice and her rules. I haven't heard back from Ryan since then. It's another relationship casualty in this whole mess. But I'm starting to understand that some bridges were probably going to burn no matter what I did. Now I'm waiting for the emergency support hearing date to be set. Jessica is still crashing at Brooke's place, and Chen must be starting to realize that his client had expected a blank check rather than having to deal with legal reality. I'm feeling less shock about the whole situation and more of a grim determination to see this through properly. This is definitely going to get rougher before it gets better. It got dirtier, which honestly shouldn't have shocked me at this point. We had the emergency support hearing last week, and it was quite the spectacle. Jessica showed up looking genuinely stressed and wouldn't meet my eyes the entire time. Chen argued passionately that she was destitute and being victimized by my malicious financial cutting. Rodriguez calmly presented the text message that had initiated the lawyer's only communication rule. She showed bank statements proving that I had canceled supplementary cards only after receiving that text. She provided evidence that I was still maintaining the mortgage, utilities, lease payments, and insurance, all the major fixed costs of our shared life. Most damaging of all, she presented clear evidence of Jessica's attempt to drain the forgotten joint account after she had demanded that lawyers handle everything. Tyler, my shop foreman who's known both of us for years, came as a character witness. He testified that I'd always been completely transparent about finances and never controlling in any way. He pointed out that Jessica had always enjoyed free spending, frequent girls' trips, and regular salon visits throughout our marriage. Tyler had been with me since the very early days when the shop was just me, a TIG welder, and a beat-up truck. He'd watched me build everything through pure determination and countless hours of back-breaking work. He also knew that Jessica had only really started showing up around the shop once the business became profitable. Tyler testified about a specific incident that really highlighted the dynamic of our relationship. He remembered the night before a major installation when I was sick with severe food poisoning but worked through it anyway, literally vomiting between welds. I had to finish because missing that deadline would have killed our reputation with a major client. When I finally got home at 3:30 in the morning, Jessica had complained that I was being overly dramatic about being sick. The judge clearly wasn't buying Chen's theatrical performance. At one point, she asked Jessica directly why there had been no prior discussion before sending the text message. Jessica mumbled something vague about feeling intimidated, which almost made me laugh out loud. I'm probably the quieter one in our relationship, and the judge seemed equally skeptical of that claim. At another point, Jessica claimed that I controlled every aspect of her life and that she needed to escape from my financial abuse. Rodriguez smoothly pulled out printed Instagram posts from just 3 months earlier, showing Jessica's weekend spa trip with her friends, a trip that I had paid for in full. The post was captioned, "Freedom Weekend, thanks hubby," with heart emojis. "Your Honor," Rodriguez said, directing the judge's attention to credit card statements. These show hair salon expenses of $245, clothing purchases of $465, and dining out with friends totaling $420, all in a single month, all paid by Mr. Sullivan while he drove a 12-year-old truck and worked 65-hour weeks. I noticed Jessica physically flinch as those numbers were read aloud in court. She had always insisted that those expenses were completely normal for a woman my age. It was interesting how different they sounded when presented in a formal legal setting. The result was much closer to what Rodriguez had proposed than what Chen had demanded. Temporary support was ordered at $2,400 monthly, enough for basic necessities and partial legal fees, but nowhere near funding her previous lifestyle. The judge specifically noted that Jessica's own actions, including the text message and the account drain attempt, had contributed significantly to her current situation. We had dodged a major bullet, but I could tell they weren't finished with their tactics. Walking to my truck after court, I found Victoria waiting for me in the parking lot. She was standing with her arms crossed, wearing designer sunglasses that I assume were hiding what could only be described as daggers for eyes. "This isn't over," she hissed as I walked past her toward my vehicle. "She should have left you years ago," Victoria continued, clearly trying to provoke some kind of reaction. "Funny," I replied, without breaking stride or looking back. "I was just thinking the same thing about you." As I drove away, my phone pinged with a notification. Victoria had tagged me in a Facebook post that read, "Some men think financial abuse is acceptable. Some judges enable it. The system is broken," complete with crying face emojis. I immediately took a screenshot and sent it to Rodriguez with a message saying, "Witness intimidation." She replied within minutes, "Keep collecting these. We're building a clear pattern of harassment." The next day, Ryan showed up at my shop unannounced during business hours. He walked right past my receptionist, Jeff, who gave me the, "Should I call the cops?" look. I waved Jeff off and decided to hear what Ryan had to say. "Need to talk," Ryan said, glancing around at my employees who were pretending not to listen to the conversation. "I'm working here, Ryan. Make it quick," I replied. "You're ruining her life," he said, his voice carrying a mix of anger and desperation. "All she wanted was some space to figure things out. She didn't expect you'd go nuclear like this." Space? I actually laughed at that. She hired a divorce attorney before she even sent me that text message. That's not asking for space, Ryan. That's planning an ambush. "You could still support her while you work through this," he pushed, clearly not understanding the legal reality of the situation. "We are working through it, legally, exactly as she demanded," I said. "Support is now court-ordered, just like she wanted everything to be handled through lawyers. It's not enough money for her to live on," he said. "It's exactly what the judge decided was fair based on actual needs rather than wants," I replied. "You might want to ask why your sister planned all this while expecting me to keep funding everything indefinitely." "Sister?" Ryan looked genuinely confused by my reference. "Victoria's been coaching this whole thing for years. Ask Jessica about that if you want the real story." Ryan left looking troubled, which gave me some hope that maybe I could eventually neutralize at least one potential ally in their camp. Derek stopped by that evening with drinks and pizza to decompress after what had been a long day. "Heard about the hearing," he said, settling into a chair in my office. "Sounds like Rodriguez really kicked ass in there." She absolutely did. Jessica looked completely shocked when the judge only awarded her $2,400 instead of the $8,200 Chen was demanding. "They always are shocked," Derek said, opening our drinks. "My ex demanded $13,500 a month during our divorce. The judge gave her $3,500 and told her to get a job. According to our daughter, she cried for days afterward. What really pisses me off is that I would have been completely reasonable if Jessica had just talked to me like an adult," I said. "Instead, she chose to go for the full ambush approach." "That's Victoria's influence right there," Derek replied. "She's been telling Jessica that you're the enemy for years. I saw it clearly at your anniversary party last year, the way Victoria watched you like she was cataloging evidence for some future case." Derek was absolutely right about that. Victoria had been present for every step of this process, slowly nudging Jessica away from me with small comments about my work hours, pointed questions about our finances that were designed to create doubt, and constant suggestions that other husbands gave their wives more freedom. It was like a slow-acting poison that Jessica had been eager to drink. The following week, the really dirty tactics started in earnest. First was an anonymous complaint called into my business line and reported to the Welding Certification Board. Someone had alleged unsafe practices and code violations at my shop. Thankfully, my shop passes regular inspections with flying colors, so this was more of an annoyance than a real threat. The inspector came by for a quick walkthrough and gave us a clean bill of health. It was clearly an attempt to mess with my livelihood, which was a pretty low blow even by their standards. Rodriguez noted it in our file, though it's tough to prove the source of anonymous complaints. Still, it adds to the overall pattern of harassment we're documenting. The second dirty trick came in the form of a phone call from Jessica's parents. They were in full tears and accusations mode. "How could you do this to her? She's struggling so much. The judge was completely unfair. You need to give her more money. Think of all the years she gave you." I gave them the same response I'd been giving everyone. Jessica chose this path, Lawyers handle all financial matters as she specifically requested, and I can't discuss any details of the case. They called me heartless and hung up on me. It's just more relentless emotional manipulation designed to make me crack under pressure. The thing is, they really thought I would just keep paying for everything forever while they positioned themselves for maximum advantage in court. My response has been to stick to pure logic under pressure, and their tactics have just made the entire situation clearer to me. Simply reacting to their moves wasn't going to be enough anymore. I needed to start proactively securing my legal position and systematically shut down every avenue they had for manipulation, strictly by the book. I decided it was time to take proactive legal steps rather than just reacting to their moves. The SUV situation needed to be addressed first. Rodriguez sent Chen a formal letter outlining the situation clearly. Temporary support had been established by the court, and Jessica now needed to handle the vehicle situation independently. She could either take over the lease if she qualified financially, return the vehicle to me or the dealership, or find alternative transportation. I would stop making payments at the next cycle, and the insurance coverage that I'd been maintaining would cease at the same time. She had 30 days to solve this problem within the legal framework that she had created. For the house, I filed for formal exclusive use since Jessica had voluntarily abandoned it, and the judge hadn't granted her request for it during the emergency hearing. I also started the valuation process for either a sale or buyout situation. A buyout seemed unlikely given Jessica's financial situation, but I wanted to establish clear legal control and move toward proper asset division. I pushed for immediate and comprehensive financial discovery. I suspected there might be hidden assets, and it was time for complete transparency, legally mandated transparency. If Jessica was hiding things, that would mean serious trouble with the court. I also started systematically documenting every instance of harassment. The business complaint, the manipulative phone calls. Everything got logged with dates, times, and detailed summaries. Rodriguez explained that this pattern of bad faith tactics would significantly influence the final settlement negotiations. The legal fees were mounting, but this wasn't about revenge. It was about methodically managing the situation within the legal boundaries that Jessica had established, especially now that they were resorting to increasingly underhanded tactics. The anonymous business complaint had crossed a clear line, which made decisive legal countermoves absolutely essential. The day before my 30-day deadline, Jessica broke her own rule and texted me directly. "Marcus, you can't take the SUV away. How will I get anywhere? Please stop this." I immediately took a screenshot and sent it to Rodriguez. My reply was simple and direct. "Jessica, per your instructions dated, date of original text, all communication must go through lawyers. Please contact Chen." After that, there was silence. We're now 4 months into this disaster, and the SUV situation exploded exactly like I had predicted it would. Let me give you some quick background on this. It's a 2022 Ford Explorer, leased in my name for about $625 a month plus insurance. Jessica had always been the primary driver since I have my own F250 for work that's completely paid off. The lease still has another 19 months remaining. After the court-ordered temporary support was established, Rodriguez gave Chen the 30-day notice about the SUV with 3 clear options. Jessica could qualify for lease takeover and transfer everything to her name. She could return the vehicle to me or the dealership, or she could find alternative transportation arrangements. Chen responded by arguing that transportation was a necessity and demanding that I continue making payments indefinitely as additional support outside the court order. Rodriguez shut that argument down immediately. Jessica ignored the deadline completely. She kept driving the SUV, probably assuming that I wouldn't actually follow through on stopping the payments. She was wrong about that. When the next payment date arrived, I did exactly what I had said I would do. No payment was made. 2 weeks later, I got an angry phone call from the leasing company. I explained the entire situation and told them that I wasn't responsible for the vehicle's current location since I didn't have physical access to it. I gave them Jessica's contact information and explained that she was an unauthorized driver who was refusing to return the vehicle to the rightful lessee. They were not happy about the situation. 4 days after that conversation, Brooke called me absolutely screaming. Apparently, repo men had taken the SUV from her driveway while Jessica was at a yoga class. Jessica had been hiding the vehicle at Brooke's place, thinking they wouldn't be able to find it there. "That's exactly what happens when you ignore legal letters and court orders," I said, before hanging up on Brooke's hysteria. An hour later, my work email was hit with a message from Victoria. My sister is stranded with no transportation because of your vindictive games. Hope you feel better now, you absolute jerk. Derek stopped by that afternoon and caught me reading Victoria's latest email. More correspondence from the Hell Sister? He asked with amusement. Yep, the SUV got repossessed and she's completely losing it, I replied. Derek actually laughed out loud. You know, I remember warning you about her at your wedding reception. You said I was being paranoid, I reminded him. I did, he admitted. At the reception, I pulled you aside after seeing Victoria corner Jessica 3 separate times during the party. I told you, that sister's going to be trouble. The way she looks at you, it's like she's already planning the divorce. You dismissed it as drunk talk. He had been absolutely right, and I'd been completely blind to it. Chen filed another emergency motion claiming that I had essentially stolen the vehicle from Jessica. The judge shut it down immediately after Rodriguez presented the notification letters and the court transcripts from our previous hearings. The judge actually looked visibly annoyed with them for wasting the court's time with frivolous motions. After we left the courthouse, Victoria was waiting for us again. This time she had Jessica with her, who immediately looked away when she saw me approaching. Victoria marched right up to me with obvious anger. You think you're so clever with your lawyer and your paperwork, she snarled, loud enough for other people leaving the courthouse to hear. Men like you always find ways to twist the system to your advantage. I looked her directly in the eyes and replied calmly, Unlike you, Victoria, the legal system doesn't care about gender. It only cares about facts. Her face turned bright red with rage. You son of a... Is there a problem here? Rodriguez appeared at my side, subtly holding her phone in recording mode. Victoria stormed off, dragging Jessica behind her like a reluctant child. Rodriguez smiled at me and said, Another exhibit for our harassment file. Jessica is now taking Uber everywhere, apparently, and her parents are driving her around sometimes when she needs to go longer distances. She's telling everyone who will listen that I took away her transportation in a cruel and vindictive move. What she conveniently doesn't mention to these people is that she refused to handle the situation properly for over a month despite receiving multiple official notices and having several clear options presented to her. I actually felt somewhat bad for the leasing company having to deal with this mess. They ended up charging me penalties for the repossession, but Rodriguez assured me that we could include those fees in our final settlement demands as damages directly resulting from Jessica's deliberate actions. It's exhausting having to document every single interaction and incident, but it's definitely paying off. Every confrontation and every piece of harassment just digs their hole deeper from a legal standpoint. 6 months into this nightmare, the financial discovery phase has been absolutely revealing. When we first started the legal process, Jessica submitted her financial disclosures, claiming that she had only her personal checking account with roughly $1,050, some clothes and personal items, and that was essentially it. Poor victimized Jessica with absolutely nothing to her name. Or so she wanted everyone to believe. Rodriguez pushed hard for comprehensive financial discovery, demanding bank statements going back 4 years, tax records, and documentation of any investment accounts. Chen fought this request aggressively, claiming it was harassment and an unnecessary burden on his client. The judge ordered full disclosure anyway. What we uncovered was extremely interesting, to say the least. There was a separate savings account at a credit union that Jessica had never mentioned, containing $24,700. The account had been opened 4 years ago, with regular deposits being made throughout that time. She also had cryptocurrency holdings worth approximately $10,900 that had been purchased during our marriage, using what should have been marital funds. Even more interesting were the regular cash deposits being made to her checking account that didn't match her reported income from the social media work. She was receiving an extra $650 to $900 most months that was completely unaccounted for in her financial disclosures. But the most damaging evidence came in the form of emails between Jessica and Victoria spanning back 3 years. These emails showed a systematic campaign of undermining our marriage that had been going on far longer than I had realized. Some of the highlights from this email trail were particularly enlightening. 3 years ago, Victoria had written, "He makes you ask for money like a child. That's classic financial abuse." Jessica had responded, "It's just our budget system. I agreed to it when we got married." Victoria's reply was, "That's classic victim mentality. He's conditioned you to think this is normal." 2 years ago, Victoria wrote, "Greg at my office just got divorced and his wife got everything, including his entire retirement account. You should talk to his lawyer about knowing your options." Jessica responded, "We're not getting divorced, Victoria." Victoria's reply: "I'm just saying you should know your options. Men hide money all the time." 10 months ago, Victoria had written, "Does he even know about that Nordstrom shopping trip you took last weekend? See, you're already hiding things because he's made you afraid to spend money." Jessica replied, "I'm not afraid. I'm just avoiding an unnecessary argument." Victoria's response: "That's fear, Jessica. Normal marriages don't operate like that." 6 months ago, Victoria had advised, "You need your own safety net. Start putting cash aside where he can't track it." Jessica had responded, "That feels dishonest to me." Victoria wrote back, "It's not dishonest. It's self-protection. All men are financial predators when it comes down to it." The most damning email was dated just 3 weeks before Jessica sent me the divorce text. Victoria had written, "Chen says to do it exactly like we discussed. Text message only, no face-to-face conversation, and demand lawyers-only communication. He'll cave within days, and you'll be able to maintain your lifestyle during the negotiations." Men always fold when they're confronted with legal pressure. It turned out that the $650 to $900 in extra monthly cash was coming directly from Victoria's safety net contributions. The emails didn't just show Victoria suggesting divorce. They provided clear evidence that she had orchestrated the entire ambush strategy from beginning to end. Chen tried to claim that the savings account was separate property consisting of gifts from Jessica's parents. He argued that the cryptocurrency investments were independent investments that Jessica had researched herself, and that the mysterious cash deposits were payment for small social media jobs that she had done off the books. All of this was conveniently undocumented, of course. Rodriguez methodically dismantled every single one of these claims. The savings account had been funded partially through transfers from our joint account before we had stopped using it regularly, all documented with bank records. The cryptocurrency had been purchased using our Amazon credit card rewards points that we had accumulated together, also fully documented. The undeclared income from these supposed small jobs had never been reported on our tax returns, which raised additional legal issues beyond just the divorce proceedings. Meanwhile, I had been living alone in our house, maintaining it properly and documenting absolutely everything that happened. I had the house professionally appraised, and it was worth about $105,000 more than what we had originally paid for it. Rodriguez filed for it to be considered a marital asset subject to a 50-50th split, despite Jessica's lawyers trying to claim that she had contributed more to the home's value through her decorating choices. This claim was absolutely laughable considering that I had personally done all the major renovations, including building the custom kitchen island that Jessica loved showing off on her Instagram account to make it look like we had hired expensive contractors. Derek came over that weekend to help me replace the water heater, and we talked about how the case was developing. "How's everything looking legally?" he asked as we were carrying the old water heater out to his truck. "Better every single day," I told him. Victoria's email trail is an absolute goldmine of evidence. The judge is going to love reading through all of that. "I told you from the beginning that woman was toxic," Derek said. He had always been wary of Victoria's influence. "That woman's got more venom than an entire rattlesnake farm." Get this, Jessica is now claiming that she contributed more to the house's value because she picked out the paint colors, I said as we set the old heater down. Derek actually snorted with laughter. "Yeah, and I invented Tesla because I happened to drive one. She was out shopping for decorative pillows while you were installing kitchen cabinets with a separated shoulder." He remembered that specific weekend when I had fallen off a ladder at the job site, but still finished our kitchen installation because we couldn't afford to hire contractors to do the work. The anonymous certification board complaint came back to bite them in a major way. My security cameras had captured Victoria's car driving past my shop multiple times on the morning that the complaint was filed. This provided a direct connection between her and the harassment campaign. Rodriguez added this evidence to our growing documentation of systematic harassment. This revelation triggered another social media outburst from Victoria. "When a man can't win fairly in court, he fabricates evidence against innocent people. Stay strong, sister." Right, because I somehow fabricated her Ford Edge driving by my shop 4 times in one morning. Apparently, I have magical powers now. Throughout this entire ordeal, Jessica has been playing the victim card to anyone who would listen. Mutual friends have been calling me asking if I'm really leaving her homeless and broke like she's been telling everyone. I simply refer them to the court records, which are public documents that anyone can read. Interestingly, very few of them call back after they actually take the time to read through the real facts of the case. One night after a particularly grueling day of depositions, I found a handwritten note taped to my workshop door. It read, "We all know what you did." I recognized the handwriting as Victoria's from birthday cards that I had stored in my filing cabinet from previous years. My security cameras caught her in the act of placing it there, which provided yet another piece of evidence for our harassment file. I've lost some friends who took Jessica's side without bothering to question her version of events or look at any actual evidence. Good riddance to them, honestly. The friends who have stuck around and taken the time to understand what really happened have been surprisingly supportive, especially the guys who have been through similar divorce situations themselves. My brother has been absolutely solid throughout this whole process. He lets me vent when I need to, doesn't judge me for any of the decisions I've made, and reminds me to keep hitting the gym and stay focused on the bigger picture. We're now approaching the mediation phase of the proceedings. Rodriguez thinks we're in an extremely strong legal position. Between the hidden assets, the documented harassment campaign, Jessica's explicit demand for lawyers-only communication, followed by her attempts at direct contact, and Victoria's orchestration of the entire strategy, it all paints a very clear picture that even the judge has obviously noticed during our hearings. Jessica's carefully crafted victim narrative is completely collapsing under the weight of actual documentation and evidence. All right, I'm back with the final update on this whole mess. It's been 8 months since that text message saying, "I want a divorce," and it's finally over. The divorce is officially finalized. The last 3 months were nothing short of legal trench warfare. Chen continued to delay proceedings at every opportunity. Jessica kept playing the victim role to anyone who would listen, and they rejected every reasonable offer that Rodriguez presented. We were headed straight for a contested trial that could have dragged on for another year. However, the judge had been signaling clear impatience with Jessica's tactics during the pre-trial conferences. Facing the very real possibility of a much worse outcome in a trial, plus potentially having to pay my legal fees on top of her own, Jessica finally agreed to settle. But after everything that had happened over the past 8 months, I wasn't interested in settling for the standard 50-50th split that most divorces end up with. Too much had happened. Too many lines had been crossed, and too much evidence had been uncovered. Rodriguez and I crafted something that I think was particularly appropriate for this situation. The final settlement terms were as follows. I kept the house by buying out Jessica's half at 18% below current market value. This reduction was justified by her hidden assets and the documented harassment campaign. My business remained 100% mine, with all of Jessica's contribution claims completely dismissed by the court. All of the previously hidden assets were declared marital property, but with a 65-35 split favoring me as a penalty for her deliberate concealment. The SUV lease termination fees and penalties, totaling $5,200, were assigned solely to Jessica's responsibility. She received zero ongoing spousal support due to her hidden income, deliberate planning of the divorce ambush, and consistent bad faith tactics throughout the proceedings. She was also made responsible for 42% of my legal fees on top of paying her own attorney. Most satisfying of all, we secured a 4-year restraining order against Victoria that prevents her from contacting me or coming anywhere near my business or residence. This was Rodriguez's masterstroke, using the documented harassment pattern we had built up over the months. The day after the judge approved the final settlement, Jessica showed up at my workshop. Jeff called me to the front desk because he wasn't sure how to handle the situation. When I saw her, she looked absolutely terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, obvious weight loss, and her usual designer clothes had been replaced by what looked like Target basics. "Can we please talk?" she asked, her voice cracking with emotion. "The settlement is destroying me financially," she continued before I could respond. "I can't afford my apartment anymore, and my credit is completely ruined." "You should have thought about the consequences before planning an ambush divorce," I replied calmly. "Victoria convinced me that you would just fold and fund my new single life indefinitely," Jessica said, tears starting to form in her eyes. "Yeah, we all saw those emails during discovery," I reminded her. "I'm going to lose my apartment," she sobbed. "I don't know where I'm going to live." "That's not my problem anymore, Jessica," I said firmly. "We were married for 13 years, and you ended it with less consideration than you'd give to canceling a magazine subscription," I continued. "You set the rules for how this would be handled." She reached out and touched my arm. "I still love you, Marcus." I actually laughed at that. "No, Jessica. You love what I provided for you. There's a big difference." I nodded toward the door. "You need to leave now." "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked desperately. "I hear Victoria has a spare room," I suggested. This isn't you, she said as she turned to leave. You're not this cold of a person. I adapted to the rules that you established, I replied. Turns out I'm pretty good at playing by them. As she was walking toward the door, I added one final comment. By the way, those emails where Victoria called me financially abusive while she was helping you hide money from me? Those are all part of the court record now. Public documents. Your friends can read them anytime they want. The look of absolute horror on her face was worth every penny of the legal fees I'd paid. The aftermath of the divorce has been exactly what you'd expect. Jessica is now living with her parents, which I'm sure is a humbling experience for someone who had gotten used to a certain lifestyle. Her social media accounts went completely dark after several of our mutual friends discovered the truth by reading through the court records that are publicly available. Victoria got demoted at her job, and it turns out that falsely reporting a certified business to regulatory authorities has real professional consequences. The restraining order means she can't even drive past my shop or house anymore, which has brought a level of peace to my life that I hadn't realized I was missing. Jessica still texts me periodically, despite the settlement terms that clearly prohibit this kind of contact. Her most recent message read, I lost everything because of a stupid mistake. Please help me. I don't reply to any of these messages. The only response she gets from me is the automatic monthly transfer from her account to mine for the legal fees that she owes me. It serves as a monthly reminder of the real price of betrayal and poor planning. Ryan came by the shop last week, and while it was awkward at first, he had actually taken the time to read through the court documents that are available to the public. I had no idea what they were planning, he told me. Man, I'm genuinely sorry for how I acted during all this. We're slowly rebuilding that friendship, and he's honestly the only person from Jessica's family who's worth maintaining a relationship with. Derek brought drinks over to celebrate when the final paperwork came through, and we sat in my garage workshop, the same place where I'd been sitting the night I got that life-changing text message. Remember when you were just starting out in business? Derek asked, looking around at the tools and equipment. You were working pipeline during the day and setting up this shop at night. I nodded, remembering those exhausting early years. Jessica complained constantly back then that you never took her anywhere nice, Derek continued. Those early years were absolutely brutal. You were putting an 85-hour week split between the day job and building this business. Jessica was always comparing your lifestyle to her friends' marriages. Never mind that those guys were 12 years older with already established careers. You built something real here, Derek said, gesturing around the shop. Something solid and lasting. She never appreciated what that actually took. He was absolutely right about that. Now, 8 brutal months later, the divorce is expensive and stressful, but I'm actually doing well. Better than well, if I'm being honest. The business is growing steadily, and last month I bought a Harley-Davidson, something that Jessica had always vetoed as being too dangerous and a midlife crisis cliche. I take that bike out every weekend now, and it feels absolutely fantastic. There was no dramatic revenge plot or elaborate scheme on my part. It was just steady, methodical application of logical consequences to the choices that Jessica made. The fact that she's now broke and living with her disappointed parents while watching me thrive is a form of justice that I couldn't have designed better myself. She wanted everything to be formal and legal, and she got exactly that, along with all the cold reality that such an approach entails. As the sign in my shop says, measure twice, cut once. She measured wrong, and the cut turned out to be permanent. Looking back on this whole experience, I learned some valuable lessons. Trust your instincts about toxic people in your life, even when they're family members of people you love. Document everything when dealing with legal matters. Don't let emotional manipulation override logical decision-making. And sometimes, the best response to someone who wants to play games is to become better at their game than they are. I'm in a much better place now than I was 8 months ago. The business is thriving. I have a clear understanding of who my real friends are, and I've learned that I'm much stronger and more resilient than I ever knew. Jessica thought she was going to destroy me financially and emotionally, but instead she freed me from a relationship that had become toxic without me fully realizing it. Would I change how things happened? Honestly, no. This was probably the wake-up call I needed, even though I didn't know it at the time. Sometimes the trash takes itself out, and you just have to be smart enough to not bring it back in.